Yeah, thank you all for joining us. My name's Nufri and I'm with Codepink. I'm also part of our new chapter in Britain. So if you're based in Britain and keen to get involved in feminist anti-imperialist organizing, please let me know. I'm really delighted to be sharing this event with you all tonight. We have four incredible speakers, three of which who are here with us now, who you'll be able to see, and a fourth speaker who will be joining in a little bit. Um, I will introduce them all in a while, but I first wanted to get a little bit into why we're here in the first place and why we're having this call. Over the weekend we saw more massacres in Gaza and in Lebanon, all conducted with American weapons, American manufactured and supplied weapons, and with the protection and support of the US and Britain. I think in this case it has to be emphasized that Britain is not just complicit in the genocide, but it's a direct participant. Parts of weapons that are being used by Israel to commit genocide are made in Britain, but also critically, Britain is using its colonial military bases on Cyprus, for which it's about a 40-minute flight to Palestine, to transport not only an unknown number of weapons and soldiers for Israel to commit genocide with, but also for surveillance flights. It's flown at least 1 to 2 surveillance flights over Gaza every day, which only accelerated under Starmer's government. And this intel that's being gathered is being given to Israel. I think it's about up to 8 hours per day, per flight rather. Um, so Britain has given Israel, thousands of hours of footage, which it's clearly using to target hospitals, homes, people in tents, aid warehouses, and so much more that we don't know about. And so with this context is how I think we need to frame our understanding of Britain's role in the genocide, and is of course why we're seeing this repression against activists and journalists. And so these terror laws are nothing new. They've been used to produce a permanent state of exception, to justify these measures and to normalize Islamophobia, the results of which we saw at the riots in August briefly. They've been used to silence support for anti-colonial resistance and have a long history of doing so, right to South African apartheid. Meanwhile, in the US, today the so-called non-profit killing bill is being reintroduced after failing to pass in the House last week. The bill, HR 9495, will give the president vast powers to label nonprofits as terrorist supporting organizations and strip them of their tax-exempt status. And we know this is a direct attack on groups like Codepink and others campaigning for Palestine. So if you're in the US, please call or email your congresspeople and remind them to vote no when this is reintroduced. It's likely there will be a vote tomorrow or on Wednesday. And you can find more information on that at codepink.org/block the bill. And so this kind of language of terrorism and this use of the word terrorism, while it's been used for a long time, we're seeing an escalation. And that escalation is why we're joined by these three speakers here, because they've all been victims of this criminalization of journalism and activism. And so the way that today will go is I'll introduce each of the speakers and ask them all to briefly explain what happened to them, what repression they faced, why they were criminalized for their support of Palestine. And then we'll go through a few questions, hopefully have some dialogue between them. And then at the end, hopefully we'll have some time for audience questions. So please submit your questions below for our speakers. So firstly, I'd like to ask Asa. Asa Winstanley is a journalist and associate editor at the Electronic Intifada, who writes on Palestine and the Israel lobby in particular. His amazing book, Weaponizing Anti-Semitism, examined how the pro-Israel lobby brought down Jeremy Corbyn. And in the chat, you'll find how you can subscribe to Asa's Substack and follow him on Twitter. So thank you for joining us, Asa. Could you briefly explain how you were criminalized and what repression you faced fairly recently?
Yeah, thank you. And thanks for inviting me to this meeting. I think it's quite important that, well, it's very important that we talk about this issue publicly and push back against it. So, 1 month ago, 1 month and 1 day ago exactly, um, the British counter-terror police raided my home and my office here. They searched the whole house, but they mostly focused on this office. And they said that we have a warrant to search the house and your vehicle, because we suspect an offence under the Counter-Terrorism Act. They showed me warrants. I keep this office locked. They were initially able to get in. Yeah, I mean, and it was, it's not a nice thing to be woken up by the very serious counter-terror police. This is not your. I know we've got an American audience here. Um, these are not PC Plod, right? These are not your regular coppers. This is the counter-terror police, right? They are supposedly to deal with people like the IRA and Al Qaeda. That's why they was created in the first place, supposedly. But they're not MI5. They're not the British equivalent to the FBI in that way. But they do report to MI5. So, it's very serious. It can be quite frightening. Um, all told, they were here for about 6 hours. They didn't arrest me, thankfully. It was quite unusual in that respect. They didn't arrest me, let alone charge me. They may still arrest me in the future. I don't know. Um, so that was an unusual aspect that they were able to enter my home, raid, and seize all my devices. So that was the other thing they did. The repression that I've been subject to is they seized all my devices that I use for my journalism, and they made it very clear they were specifically interested in and wanted to take away the devices that I use for my journalism. So my laptop, my main computer, my phone, an old mobile phone, iPad, um, and a hard drive. So it was a blow, it was difficult. It's something that's I'm still dealing with the aftermath of, right? Setting up a new laptop, phone, telling all my old contacts that not to use my old mobile number anymore, things like that. There's a lot of there's a lot of basically they seem to be making it as difficult as possible for me to carry on with my journalism. And the letter that accompanied the warrant made it clear, and the way they were speaking made very clear. The warrant read, "We're aware of your profession," so they know that I'm a journalist. They know that I write about Palestine. Um, and they also said that we know your involvement in the undercover policing inquiry, which is related to uh, undercover officers who infiltrate British police infiltrating activist groups, thousands of activist groups since the 1960s. Um, One of the groups I was involved in my early to mid 20s, a Palestine solidarity group called the International Solidarity Movement, was infiltrated by one of these undercover officers. So that's an interesting aspect of it as well. And they said, so despite these two things, we are going to be searching the premises and seizing devices. So, it we're fighting it. I've got some very good legal representation. It's still a possibility they could arrest me or try and charge me with something. And I was not given any explanation as to what prompted this investigation. All they would say was social media posts, but they didn't specify social media posts. This is the senior officer speaking to me in the morning of the raid. So it was 6:30 a.m. All this happened. We were fast asleep, woken up by very loud banging and ringing a doorbell. So yeah, and this is something that's been happening to a lot of people.
Yeah, thank you, Asa. Um, Next, I'd like to invite Richard. Richard Medhurst is an independent journalist and analyst, most known for his coverage of Julian Assange's extradition case, and his work mostly focuses on exposing Western imperialism, US politics, and politics in the Middle East. Again, in the caption, in the chat rather, you can subscribe to his YouTube channel and follow him on Twitter. Um, Richard, do you like to similarly kind of introduce yourself and explain the repression that you faced?
You're muted,
Sorry,
Richard.
Richard, I think you're muted.
You can hear me now. I think you should be able to hear me now. So just wanted to say thanks to Codepink and to everyone for organizing this important event, putting this whole show together. And so as you pointed out, I spend a lot of my time as a journalist, talking about Western imperialism. Um, there's no shortage of that coming from Britain. So, and of course, in the context of Gaza, what happened to me is they arrested me off of the plane. So I landed in Heathrow on August 15th, and six police. I think, yeah, so five of them were in plain clothes. They were at the door of the plane. Two of them or three of them came on the plane and were kind of like, handing me for my luggage and backpack and all this stuff. Like, do you have anything in the cargo? Where are your bags? All this stuff. And so they, I didn't even grasp really that I had been arrested for several hours. Actually, I didn't even understand that I'd been actually like arrested, because what they usually do is they Schedule 7 you, so they will detain you under the Terrorism Act, which is, it, I mean, it's practically an arrest, right? Other countries would certainly call that an arrest, but under English common law, they detain you for a couple of hours and question you, and it's just, draconian. I mean, they force you to answer the questions. You're not allowed to have a lawyer for an hour. I think it used to be they can hold you for 8 hours, then they changed it to 6 hours. It's one of these war on terror repression tools that comes from actually before, even from the days of the British occupation in Ireland. So I didn't even grasp that I had been arrested. Number one, I didn't even understand like what they wanted. I didn't know what Section 12(1)(a) was. So again, just to be very clear, they arrested me as so I became the first journalist to be arrested under Section 12(1)(a) in the UK. And it is extraordinarily serious on multiple levels, right? The fact that it was not a detention, it was an arrest. The fact that they took me to the Heathrow police station, and I spent around 24 hours. I spent the night there. I slept in jail, and for about 20 hours, I really had no idea why I was there, because they just wouldn't explain what Section 12(1)(a) was. They said something about, they would read this one line over and over about prescribed groups. Well, what prescribed groups? Can I have a copy of the law? I would ask them so I could read it in the cell. So they arrested me about 6:30 p.m. and questioned me the next day about 2 p.m. Yeah, so about 20 hours. I literally did not actually know why I was there. And I think all of that was part of like this psychological intimidation. The fact they took even my shoelaces away, right? The fact you're surveyed the whole time when you're sleeping, when you're peeing. No, there's no toilet paper. You have to eat with cardboard. You're not allowed to have apparently you're not allowed to have a knife and fork or spoon. You have to eat with cardboard, but there's a nice drawing of a of a fork on it at least. I mean, I got the message with that. It's really just extraordinary, really extraordinary. And you know, I I was supposed to go back actually. I think yeah, about 3 days ago. That was when I had to go back for my bail date, and now they've extended that another 3 months. So it's not enough that they arrested me. It's that I'm under investigation as well. And so if you look at 12(1)(a), it's it's quite
abstract and quite loosely worded. And as I said, I became kind of the first casualty of this latest crusade. I think they're calling it Operation Incessantness. I'm not quite sure if I'm under that umbrella of things, but it looks that way. Either way, they confiscated all of my electronics, phones, headphones, microphones, wired microphones, wireless microphones. I mean, even a Faraday bag, which was, I'm not quite sure what they thought they can extract off of a Faraday bag. They've given back some of these things since, although not the telephones. And, if you add all of this up, replacing this equipment costs thousands of pounds easily. And these are obviously journalistic tools, right? So there's also been some interesting talk from the security minister. There's a letter published. I posted it on my Twitter from the security minister saying that he there's no absolute protection for journalism under the Terrorism Act, which is a very daunting and ominous thing to say. So, all of this was about my reporting on Palestine, and they gave me really the full treatment, right? I mean, just all of it, the whole way, and it's still not over. So, they can charge me at any moment, and I believe it's 14 years if you're charged and convicted, or up to 14 years. I don't know. It can vary from case to case, but these are the kinds of prospects that are in store. So yeah, it's really unbelievable that this is happening in a country that calls itself a democracy. And honestly, I mean, completely blown out of proportion, to put it mildly. So I think that kind of encapsulates what happened to me and what is happening.
Thank you very much. It does. And next, Sarah, I'd like you to introduce yourself. So Sarah is an activist and journalist who reports crucially, accurately, and substantially about US-Israeli genocide in Palestine. She was also due to set sail as part of the Gaza Freedom Flotilla and has taken action with Palestine Action. Again, in the chat, you can find her Twitter, and should follow her there. And Sarah, the same, please.
Yeah, I've kind of realized that, that there isn't very much of a pattern. My arrest was very different. When I saw that when the knock on the door came, I looked out of the window and they had closed the top end of my town off. There were about 5 unmarked vehicles, black vans. There was about 2 police cars at either end. And when I opened the door, they were in jeans and jumpers. There was no ID, no identification that they were police officers. And I was pushed. Literally, I opened the door because I didn't want them to break it down. I opened the door and they pushed me back as if I hadn't willingly opened the door. They pushed my son against the wall. It was quite violent. I didn't really... There was no way of identifying whether these were police or not. They said that they were the anti-terror unit. They basically, there was about 16 of them in balaclavas. So it was like being stormed by a rugby team that you couldn't identify. They had no numbers, no collars, nothing on the lapel. There was no cameras. They literally were in jeans and T-shirts. There were some uniformed police that also entered the house afterwards, but by which time I'd been frog marched upstairs. I wasn't allowed to get dressed. I had no shoes. I wasn't allowed to take any medications for my Crohn's. And then I had handcuffs put on me before they even explained what they were doing. They refused to show me any warrant. And then I only found out later that the warrant wasn't valid until 10:30 in the morning. So what they've done is say that they said that they didn't enter my house until 10:30 in the morning, and yet I've got about 200 witnesses that they came in at 7:10. So I'm undressed, no medication, nothing to eat, thrown in a van, and then they spent the next about 7 hours literally ransacking the house. So yes, they took much like everyone else, they took all of the electronic devices, phones, but they didn't list all the items that they took, so I can never get them back. So they took all of the charger cables for the lights, and I can't for the life of me think, why would you take the lights? There's about 50 lights that I've got 5 floors, so they light up the stairs. So they've taken all those charger cables for them. They've taken books that have been signed by authors. They've taken my underwear. I hate to say it online, but they took my underwear. They have taken £400 of money. None of these items were listed. They took £200 in Turkish lira and £200 out of my wallet. My bank cards were missing. So when I finally got out of custody, which was about maybe 12 to 14 hours later, and returned home, the house had been completely turned upside down, and some quite precious sentimental items. I had pictures ripped off the walls, but you know, one book is very precious to me because I worked with the author and I helped edit it, and she signed it, and she's no longer alive, and it can't be replaced. That's been taken. So they listed the electronic devices, the phones and the iPads, and also electronic devices that I've never had in the house. That there are some that seem to be made up that I know I've never owned, that I've never had in the house. And we didn't know whether this was to entrap me later by adding things onto these devices that wasn't me, like photographs that I shouldn't have, maybe a phone call history or something that I shouldn't have. Of course, my son signed that everything was okay because he doesn't know what I own. He was only visiting. He doesn't know that these items didn't exist. But they took my passport and then denied that they'd taken it, and then given me 7 days to surrender my passport or I go to prison for 5 years. But my passport had been taken. All I could do was say to the solicitor, I don't have my passport. They've taken it. I know where it is. I know where I kept it. The money's gone. Bank cards have gone. My underwear's gone. My mother's ashes have been scattered all over the attic, and they've knelt through them. There's hand and footprints where they completely desecrated her remains and crushed the urn. All sorts of things missing. And I'm still finding today, oh my God, I don't have that. Where is that? But the expensive stuff, yeah, is I suppose I've got a press pass. I'm not really, I mean, I'm more of an activist than a journalist, but having a press pass allows you into the press pit when you need to film speeches and things. They didn't touch the press passes, which I would have thought they might have taken, but they took things which have no correlation to any form of activism or even a connection to Palestine. They just took personal items so that I no longer have them. They took my Crohn's medication card, which I need to use disabled toilets. You need your card and your key. They took these items and they hid them inside the mattress. And it's only by pure chance that we found them, just because the house was in such disarray. We had to strip it and start again. I think they were fishing. I don't know if they knew what to charge me on. They said they were going to charge me on a year's worth of tweets. Well, that's about 11,000 tweets. So there's no way I can remember what I said and what I didn't remember. But really, I don't think they knew. And I think what they were doing is turning the house upside down, trying to find something that they could charge me on, trying their hardest. And so what remained was a house that took 7 people to put back together again. I had to get help. I couldn't do it. My bedding was everywhere. My medications were lost. They were gone. And the fact that they haven't listed any of these items that they've taken means I can never claim for them back. I can never get them back. I can never ask for the money back. That's just been taken. So I think each arrest or each raid has been a little bit different. I think I was treated quite badly. My wrists were bleeding by the time I got to the police station because the handcuffs cut the circulation off and also cut both my wrists. So then they thought that I might be a suicide risk because I had cuts to my wrist. They thought maybe I'd done that in the back of the police van. They also drove the wrong way. They didn't drive to the police station. They did a detour. So there was a point I thought, these aren't police. This is an execution. There's no way you can ask plainclothes people to provide identification if they refuse. And I suddenly thought, I don't know if they're actually authentic police. We're driving the wrong way, a long way away. It was about an hour the wrong way. I think that was done to scare me. They had a sat nav and I kept saying, you know, turn left, and they ignored it. And then they did this really superb 3-point turn with all of this convoy of vehicles all the way back round, and then we were on the right route. So actually, I haven't ever been so glad to see a police station in my life. I was quite relieved to see the sign because I did think that they were going to put a gun to my head. But I think, you know, this was done, I think, purely to terrify me. I have been arrested a lot of times. I'm quite used to it. But this was different. I think this was done maybe to rattle me because they know I've been arrested a lot of times. So they had to do something extra. So what they did is drive the wrong way and make it look like I was going to end up under a hedge somewhere. I wasn't going to make it out alive at this one. And I genuinely thought, oh God, this is Mossad. This is the end. But the interrogation, which went on for hours, was the most racist interrogation I think I've ever been witness to. And I had to break my no comment because I wanted to be heard on the tape saying this question is not appropriate. This is not okay. It's not okay to ask me why I think white people are better than brown people. I want that heard in court. I want the fact that you say, why do you think Palestinian people are better than us white people? I want that heard in court. If I go to court, it's really important that those inappropriate British police who are asking very Israeli-like questions needed to be heard in court, because I think a judge would just say, look, those questions just aren't okay. In this day and age, it's not okay to ask that. So I needed them to hear me object to those questions. Everything else was no comment. They scrabbled around about 300 tweets. I'm being charged on 11,000, but there wasn't time to do more than about 300. And even then we ran out of time. They couldn't really pinpoint anything. So I think this is why my house was completely and utterly destroyed, and why I've lost so many personal items. It was malicious. It was terrorism against a civilian. This thing about counter-terror, but they use terrorism tactics to scare you so badly that, and to scare the rest of the residents in the town who thought it was some massive shooting attack. So they didn't just terrorize me, they terrorized the town. And so to use anti-terror laws, but to do it in a way that you commit terrorism. I mean, my home was completely, it was completely invaded. My privacy, my underwear, for goodness sake, my whole wardrobe, all my clothes, everything, things hidden, things in the water tank. It was unbelievable. It was an unbelievable mess. I've never seen a mess like it. I may as well have been burgled. And that's what it is. It's theft, because I can't get these items back. So they didn't just terrorize me in my own home. They looted. They looted my money. They looted jewelry. They looted items of clothing. They looted books and pictures, keepsakes. In fact, the list is so long, we'll run out of time. So yeah, it was pretty horrific. And I can't see it going to court, because I can't see a judge accepting that this is behavior that is correct. It doesn't follow police protocol of any sort whatsoever. It's totally arbitrary. And they were really unpleasant throughout the whole thing. So luckily, I've been arrested enough times that, like, once I was in the cell, you know, for me, that's kind of, I'm okay. You know, it's just everything's now normal. But during the actual trip of going the wrong way, thinking you're going to be executed, yeah, that one rattled me. I think for probably the first time I've really been rattled during what felt like a kidnap, I think, at that point.
Yeah, thank you, Sarah. It's just horrifying every time I hear what happened to you. It's unbelievable. And finally, Ren, I'd like to invite you to speak and share. So Ren is an activist with Palestine Action, a direct action group in Britain targeting the functioning of Israel's largest weapons manufacturer, Elbit Systems. And again, in the chat, you can find out more about Palestine Action and how to sign up. So, Ren, please introduce yourself and explain what happened with you.
Hi, so much solidarity with everyone who's been speaking so far. Just, yeah, insane to hear what everyone's been saying. Yeah, I guess, like Sarah was saying, I think each kind of like tactic of repression is slightly different. In my case, I've taken action with Palestine Action before, and I've been arrested for other things as well. But in this case, it was, yeah, they came to my house about like 5 a.m. Obviously, I was asleep. They, yeah, knocked on the door, and kind of instinctively I thought like, oh, this is the police. Obviously, I think when you're in kind of like activism, you have that like knee-jerk reaction. So I like ran upstairs and told my housemate, I was like, listen, like I think the police are here. And he was like, right, okay. Started filming everything. And then yeah, I opened the door. There was like 4 police officers with 2 police cars. And they were like, can we come in? As if I had a choice. So obviously I was like, well, yeah. And they said, yeah, they didn't really tell me at first what was happening. They were just like, you're being arrested on 2 counts of criminal damage, which they wouldn't give me any explanation of like when those things had happened, like what they were, any more information at all. And then they basically said to me, okay, you kind of have to sit on the stairs, as if I was like a child or something, and we're gonna like search the whole house. So I was sleeping in my partner's room at the time, and I have my own room that wasn't labeled with my name at the time, but I told them multiple times, I was like, this isn't my room, like legally, you know, you can search the communal areas, you can search my room, but this isn't actually my room, which they ignored. So they searched my partner's room, they like stripped the bedding, they pulled all the pillowcases, you know, off the pillows, went through all of her things, like under her bed, like left everything in a massive mess. Took things of hers, like her, like went through all of her notebooks and stuff, which again I said, I was like, these aren't mine, and they had like her name on them, and you know, they were obviously hers. And then came up to my room, took so many random things, took stickers that I had bought like from a random like activist shop online. Not all of them were Palestine related. There were some like other ones that were just again random ones. They took my keffiyeh. They took a hammer from a toolbox that we had. They took I'm trying to think what else. They went through all of my notebooks as well. They took some acrylic paint that I had that was in like white and black and red. And then whilst all of this was happening, they just made me sit on the stairs essentially. And again, wouldn't really give me any more information. And every time I tried to get up, I was like, can I have some water? Like, can I, you know, not to be funny, but I was like, can I put a bra on? Can I put pants on? Like I was obviously in my pajamas. I wasn't like, you know, dressed. And they told me, they were like, yep, you can put pants on in a minute. Like, you know, you can do that in a minute. And then I asked them again and they wouldn't let me. And then they were like, we need to get a female officer. But at the minute she's searching the house. And I was like, right, okay, well, can we do that before you take me? And then yeah, the female officer was like, they were making a really, really big deal about it, and the women officer kind of like came upstairs with me and was like really weird and was kind of like, I'm gonna have to see you naked when you get dressed. And I was like, yes, that's fine. Like, I just, would like some dignity. Like, I would like to put on some underwear. They were really funny about that, and they were like, well, a minute ago you said you were fine just to go as you are. Yeah, they took loads. They wouldn't let me. I had my partner, my housemate called my partner and had her on the phone at one point. And I was just literally telling her, like, I was like, I'm gonna go to this police station, like, this is what's happening. And the officer like lunged for the phone and like made me turn it off so I couldn't tell her. And I didn't have her number, because then they were like, we're gonna take your phone. And they said, if you don't hand over your phone, we're going to turn this place upside down. So I had no real choice, so I gave them my phone. And then, yeah, they took me into the station. Again, like, very little communication. I still didn't know what things they were talking about, like what it pertains to at all. Yeah, popped me in my cell. And basically told me that it was, one of them was for an action that happened in Oxford, and then the other one was also an action that happened in Oxford, but happened whilst I was on a GPS tag, which goes off if I leave my house after it was 9 p.m. at that point. So immediately I was like, well, how do you expect me to have done this? When like my perimeter is literally mapped out to be in my house and you can see where I am. To which obviously they didn't have any response. And then they interviewed me for like over an hour, to the point where my solicitor, he was so persistent and asked so many of the same questions that my solicitor literally paused the meeting and said to him, like, like, this is ridiculous. You're just literally repeating yourself and repeating yourself. And I was just saying no comment. And even one of the other police officer who's in there had to then speak to the man who was kind of interrogating me to be like, this is insane. And then they tried to remand me for court in the morning, which I thought they were going to be successful in doing, because for a previous action I'd done, I'd been remanded, and that was only a couple of weeks before. And basically the CPS said they didn't have enough evidence, which obviously was, like, in some way a bit of a silver lining, but also just goes to show how little they had to be able to arrest me in the first place. The only evidence they had was very, very, very circumstantial for the one thing, and the other one, I was literally on tag, so they had nothing. And then they released me. They released me. Obviously kept all of my things. I was literally in my pajamas. Luckily my partner came and picked me up, but like, yeah, the whole thing was just insane. I think that's probably the gist of it.
Thank you. Buying stories and how you've all been treated for your solidarity with Palestine. And I guess this lends itself to the question of, what do you all make of this heightened repression? Do you think it shows that this is what the British state's attitude is to the movement for Palestine right now, which is, at its strongest as it has been in history? Does this show that, what you're doing, each of you in different ways, does it show that what you're doing is a threat to British imperialism and to Britain's support for genocide, whether that's direct action or accurate reporting or investigative journalism? And I think I'd like to hear everyone's responses to this, but I might start with Richard, if you have thoughts on this.
Yeah, if I could, just before answering your question, add to I believe it was what Ren was saying about, I think she was saying that she wanted to get dressed and they kind of kept jerking her around, saying like, yeah, just in a minute. And then, that happened to me with asking for water and asking to go to the toilet. They'd say, yeah, sure, in a minute. And then, it just, it would go on, I think I didn't get water for a couple of hours at least. And also this, I've got to say this, there's so many things. I was not allowed to tell anyone I wasn't allowed to speak to family or friends, and I couldn't phone a lawyer, even if I had their number. The only thing I could do is ask the police to phone a lawyer on my behalf. And given how everything was going, where they were kind of saying, well, you're allowed to know why you've been arrested, and then I'd ask and they wouldn't explain, or you're allowed to tell someone you've been arrested, and I'd ask to do that and they wouldn't let me. I wasn't very hopeful they would call a lawyer, right? I think you could forgive me in those circumstances. But to answer your question, yeah, I think that these arrests or raids, they've been orchestrated from very high up in the government, obviously. You know, someone's sat down and planned this. They seem to be done quite frequently. They have targets picked out. And I find it kind of ironic, especially because, you know, if you talk about terrorism legislation, I mean, you want to go back to when there wasn't even an Israel at all. The biggest security threat in Britain after World War II, right? So just after defeating the Nazis, it wasn't even the Soviet Union. It was Zionists. That's who the British government called terrorists. They practically invented modern terrorism. And I understand what Sarah is saying, for example, when she talks about how her raid felt very Israeli style. That's actually something that I noted when, you know, before she had said it to me. You know, there are these terror tactics, right? And a lot of projection. There's a lot of projection going on because, you know, we spoke about in the intro how Britain is doing these spy plane, you know, assist missions and participating in the genocide, right? Participating in a lot of acts of terrorism and then kind of flipping the script on us. That's another element. There's a lot of irony in all of this, right? There really is, because Israelis have gone from themselves being terrorists and quite accurately depicted as terrorists by the media and the British government in the late 1940s and early 1950s to having successfully spun that around against their own victims, be it, you know, us or people in Palestine, of course, who've borne the brunt of Israel's assaults and oppression across the years. So I find it very ironic. And another thing that I find quite ironic is that I'm the son of UN diplomats. My father even authored a counterterrorism manual for the UN because he's literally an expert in counterterrorism. So he was quite and still is quite stunned that they pulled such a you know, such a joke, honestly. I mean, the nerve of it all, really, the nerve of it. And remember, this is a manual that was passed by the General Assembly, including the UK. So there's a lot of irony in that too, personal irony. You know, it's so ridiculous. I don't want to kind of go on for too long, but to answer your question, yes, I think that they are scared we are talking too much about their actions in Palestine. And that, of course, is an extension of British imperialism. And they're punishing us for our work, be it activism or journalism.
Would anyone else like to add any comments to what
Yeah,
Richard has said or to the other introduction?
yeah. Well, yeah, I want to make one point about that, but I'd also like to talk about somebody else that this has affected recently. Um, should I come back to that
No,
or talk
I
about?
think now's a great time to.
Okay, all right. Well, yeah, I mean, I agree with what Richard said that it does seem to have been orchestrated from high up within the government. This and the paperwork. One of the details that has come out in my case is in the paperwork they gave me accompanying the warrants. It did have this line, Operation Incessantness, which nobody had ever heard of before. And it does seem to be the name of this operation targeting us all. Um, and yeah, I mean, it does seem to me that there is, you know, our friend Low Key, the musician and campaigner, calls it the tripartite security state of the US, Britain, and Israel. Um, they've become much more enmeshed in the last 20 years or so. After in the war on terror years, in the ramping up of Islamophobia. The academic David Miller has done a lot of work on this, of how the Zionist movement, how pro-Israel groups, and how the state of Israel itself has had a massive degree of influence, in Britain, especially in really ramping up Islamophobia. And we're not just talking about the EDL and Britain First and these, far-right fascist groups. We're talking about organs of the state into which Zionism has become increasingly enmeshed. We don't have time to get into all of that and into all the details of that, but there's a lot of good reporting out there about it, not least from the Electronic Intifada, who I write for. But yeah, I mean, I do think and hope and expect, more details will come out in time about this, about where the impetus for all this comes from. We will get more information. My legal team is trying to work on that, and I do believe more will come out about that in time. Um, Meanwhile, I think we can say that some of this stuff definitely comes from pressure, at least pressure from the Zionists to really crack down on Palestine Solidarity campaign, the Palestine Solidarity movement in general. Not so much the group Palestine Solidarity Campaign itself, but the wider movement in general. I mean, and I think the common denominator between a lot of us who have been targeted in this Operation Incessantness, if that's what it um, is simply that the Zionists don't like us. They really, what I mean, look, for the last year or more of this genocide, there has been a concerted campaign in the West. People are still carrying on. After more than a year of genocide, people are still coming out to demonstrate. That's not, I know it seems sometimes it seems pointless when we're just doing these demonstrations on the streets week after week and the genocide still goes on. We feel powerless. But I do think these things are having an effect. All of the campaigning that we're doing together, all of the ways in which we're exposing what Israel is doing and the complicity and the direct involvement of the British state in this, I do think it's having an effect. I think just think about how much worse it would have been without all the demonstrations, right? So I think in the case of Richard, myself, and Sarah, you know, our reporting and Sarah's activism has really been difficult to ignore, and it's been something that they've wanted to shut down. In the case of Ren, of course, and Palestine Action, they absolutely, even more, they want to stop that because that is actually doing things directly to stop the genocide from happening, right? So they absolutely want to shut that down even more. So, so yeah, I mean, I do think it's an indicator of the significance of what we're trying to do. So the person I wanted to talk about, if I may, just for a few minutes, is Natalie Strecker. So she is the latest victim of this campaign, this repressive campaign against Palestine Solidarity. And Natalie is the news broke over the weekend that she'd been arrested. Natalie is a Palestine Solidarity campaigner in the island of Jersey. For people perhaps in the US who don't know, Jersey is an island which is near France. It's off the coast of France, but it's part of the United Kingdom. It was actually occupied by the Nazis briefly during the Second World War. Anyway, so it's a small island. Natalie has been involved for many, many years in the Palestine Solidarity movement, and on Friday morning at 6, very, very similar pattern. 6:30. I just spoke to her actually before this meeting, so I've got some more details of that. So I wanted to talk about that just quickly, because there has been some reports about it. The Jersey Evening Post has done a brief article about it. Maybe I'll drop that in the chat when I'm finished talking about this. But apparently, I just spoke to Natalie, and she said it was on the front page in the Jersey Evening Post, which is the local newspaper. So that's good. But yeah, very similar to what happened to Sarah actually. It sounds like so. It's 6:30 a.m. raid, and they arrested her, and they held her in the. They interrogated her in the cells, and it seems like overall it was about 12 to 14 hours. Very similar thing, anti-terror law. Because it's not England and Wales, it's different laws apply, right? So it's the Jersey. I've got it up here somewhere. No, I can't find it now. But there's a slightly different law, but it's very similar sort of vague wording about supporting a prescribed terrorist group and all this kind of thing. Um, and they told her it was related to her social media. They interrogated her, and they arrested her. And this was, from her home. Of course, she was asleep when they woke her up. Very similar pattern. They raided her home and they seized about 25 items or so. So yeah, I spoke to her and she wanted to convey the message to everyone, to thanking them for their support, and just she's asking for people's support and to raise awareness of what's been happening to her and what's been happening, to all of us as well. And she thinks that. Yeah, she's left in a similar limbo. They didn't charge her, they didn't remand her, but it's possible they could come after her again in the future. She does have some bail conditions, but it's not perhaps that the bail conditions are perhaps not as onerous as they were for Tony Greenstein, who was banned from speaking on Twitter, although that was overturned. Tony Greenstein is an author and activist and blogger who about a year ago was subject to a similar raid as us. That they've now given him a notice of no investigation. Similar thing happened to Mick Napier from the Scottish Palestine Solidarity campaign.
Thank you, Asa, for highlighting Natalie's story for those who haven't already been aware. I wanted to ask a kind of similar question to Sarah and Ren, thinking about the heightened repression specifically against Palestine Action and similar activists. How do we fare up the successes of Palestine Action, especially in recent weeks, with lots of companies have cut ties, but how do you see that next to the escalating repression?
Yeah, I feel like I have a couple of bits to say on this, because I think it's really hard when we are facing so much repression. I think the thing with Palestine Action is that we know that it's working. 3 out of 7, 3 Elbit sites out of 10 have been shut down, with 7 to go. Barclays has dropped Elbit, APCO has dropped Elbit. Lots of places have actually committed to not working with them anymore. I think that everyone I have ever met in Palestine Action has so much fight in them and so much courage, and I think that they are prepared to face consequences that they shouldn't have to face. We've got 16 people in prison at the minute. We've actually got 2 who got released today from a Scotland prison. There's 11 of those that are on remand without trial so far. So I think I think you go into it knowing that there's going to be a certain amount of kind of consequences that you're going to have to take. I think that dealing with the increased repression has been difficult for a lot of people. But I also think that Palestine Action are very determined in their goals and very clear in their messaging, that until all ties are cut to the Zionist entity in Britain, that they will continue to operate. And I think that should be taken at that word. I think that I completely agree with what everyone else was saying a minute ago about kind of Western imperialism and the British government being scared. And I think it's particularly pertinent when it comes to Palestine Action because it's so effective. these aren't kind of abstract aims that aren't being fulfilled. They're things that are happening. And I think, yeah, I think it's a weird one to kind of square away with like the kind of repression and horrible consequences that people are facing. I also think that Palestine Action isn't stopping. And I guess that shows how people feel about it and the fight that people still have.
No, that's amazing to hear. Palestine Action is truly the best of us in Britain, massively. Another question I have is how you're all related in the way that you've all had your devices seized by the British state. And I think, Sarah, you mentioned in another interview before that you were actually directly asked for your contacts in Gaza. And so, the terror laws allow the police to seize any number of devices from people, even though, many of your alleged offenses are against things you posted on social media. So that wouldn't necessarily necessitate taking, like Richard mentioned, a lot of your own journalistic equipment. And I think connecting this to how Britain is providing a majority of the surveillance flights over Gaza, I think Al Jazeera actually released a report today that showed that Britain has, I think, carried out 47% of all flights over Gaza in the past year, followed secondly by the US at 33% and Israel at 20%, which shows already Britain is flying over double the amount of flights that Israel itself is. So I'm wondering, do you see a relation between this intelligence gathering with these surveillance flights and, the spying on activists that's happened for many years with the seizure of your devices? And maybe Sarah, you could start by answering that.
Yeah, very much so. I'm just going to jump back. I am going to answer your question, but you know, the operation I can't even say it now. Can somebody say it for me?
Incessantness.
I think you've got to realize that means it isn't going to stop, right? Okay, we have all been arrested once. We've had our homes arrested once. But I think you always have to realize that with a name like that they will be back. The idea is they haven't got what they wanted, but I expect them at any moment. I expect them at any day. They haven't got on me what they want. Now, they wanted the locations of exactly the same names who are now, and it was only released about 3 or 4 days ago. Richard would probably correct me, but the Israeli government released the names of the Palestinian journalists that are now on the assassination list. Funnily, that was the list that they gave me a month earlier. These are British police officers giving me exactly in the same order, the exact same list that the Israeli government then gave out. Some of these journalists I don't work with, some of them I do, but all of them I know. And a lot of them, I might or might not have had their phone numbers. The point is they wanted their locations and they wanted me to give them to me, or they were going to hold me for a week. And then I've now been served, or I'm about to be served, the REPA disclosure, which means I have to give my PIN numbers out or I face 5 years minimum in jail. Now, obviously, I'm not going to give my PIN numbers out. Obviously, I'm not going to give anything away that they want. So, and my solicitors have advised me, you don't give your PIN numbers out. However, that does mean that I've got to face 5 years in jail. Whether the solicitors appeal that, I will have to spend some time in custody. There's no way around it. You will either give your PIN numbers out so that they have the location of these doctors and journalists, or you say no and you go to jail. There's kind of an either or here. So that's en route. So I know that's coming. That's another part of this incessant campaign. But for me, it absolutely proved, hang on, British intelligence are working so closely with the Israeli intelligence, so closely that they were given the list of the journalists that are now on the assassination list in exactly the same order as they read out to me. And the minute I read that, of course, I picked that up on Twitter from another article. The minute I read about these journalists, I thought that's the same list. But it's not just the same list, it's the same order. It's not alphabetical. I remember the fact that I recognized, didn't recognize, do recognize. I just kind of remembered the names as they read them out. So the idea of them gaining these phone numbers will be when they make the call that the British surveillance or the Israeli surveillance that is above can locate them and assassinate them. It's a matter of life and death that I don't give out the PIN numbers. But don't forget that the British plane, surveillance plane, was flying over the World Central Kitchen vehicle. We know there was a British spy and an American spy inside the vehicle, but let's forget that for the moment. When the Israelis bombed the World Central Kitchen, a British plane was above it, was surveilling it above it. So the British are so complicit, so tied into this. We know that they have been, using the Cyprus base, enabling munitions and weapons. We have Israeli weapons factories that obviously Palestine Action are trying desperately to shut down. So we know that they're already complicit. So they need to silence us because we know all this and we keep telling everybody. And that's why I'm prepared, whether this breaks my bail conditions or not, I don't actually care. I'm beyond caring. There's a genocide. I have lost so many people that I don't even know how to grieve anymore. I'm pixelating out children's brains and stomachs. Every single morning I've pixelated about 20 or 30 images of children so that other news outlets can use them. I can't now, I'm not in a position now where I can hang about and try and protect myself. What the British government are doing is using us to gain information about locations of the people we know. Now, the Palestinians are quite clever, so I won't give away their secrets, but the point is they believe that we know. And our phone numbers ringing them is that they will answer. Of course they'll answer. Oh, it's Sarah, I'll answer that call. So I now can't ring anyone. I have to go through the third and fourth parties in order to connect with anyone. So this incessantness, I can say it this time, maybe because I'm a bit sort of riled up. The reason it's called that is because they haven't finished. They haven't finished the genocide. They haven't finished gathering information from us. They haven't finished going out for the people that they want to assassinate. They haven't finished working with the Israelis. And we're the key. We're the middle bits that fit into all this. Now, they can put us in jail, but then there'll be huge protests. So I think the bail is the jail. And in the meantime, we're being investigated and they will keep coming back until they get what they want. I think they certainly will for me. Otherwise, why call it incessantness? Why not call it, I'm not going to say protective hedge, but I mean, I just at the moment can't think, why not call it bookend or finish or something? They called it incessantness over and over and over and over again. And that means this is not done. And there will be others that they will arrest. They'll do the same to others. And each one is a little bit different. The pattern's a bit different. That's to stop us being able to guess how the pattern works, how we know what the next person should do. So there's a pattern in the fact that there's a non-pattern. Everyone's being treated either badly or well or by protocol or absolutely horrifically. And so, we're left sort of hanging, but, I'm kind of working it out. And that actually makes me now more of a threat. So this is why I expect a knock on the door at any time, because I'm starting to work out this non-pattern. I'm starting to realize who might be next. I'm starting to take precautions. And so that makes me more dangerous, I think. That got a bit heated. I'm back down now.
No, thank you so much for sharing those thoughts with us. Either Richard or Asa, do you have any comments on the intelligence? Yeah, please go ahead.
No, I just before I go back to that, again, there's so many things they threw at me. It's easy to kind of forget. I forgot to say earlier, they also served me with a Reaper notice. So or rather, the way it works is they kind of the police will ask you nicely, on a piece of paper, will you give us the passwords? And then they'll kind of they'll make sure that you write them down. So you're obliged to write them down so you can't claim later that you forgot them. That's my understanding of it. They haven't actually gone to a judge yet or gotten an order in that sense, but they are aiming to keep this Reaper matter hanging over my head very much in the same way as the Section 12(1)(a). So they can kind of turn it into a dual-pronged legal issue. And they know very well that everything they took is, these are my journalistic tools. Literally why I travel with them. So that's just one thing I wanted to add. About intelligence, I mean, intelligence is a British tradecraft. It always has been. And it's something important to underscore, not because we want to flex, but because it's a state asset that has been cultivated over decades and centuries, and it's being misused not only to murder people but also on behalf of foreign interests. So it's not even like we benefit from this murder, if you could even justify such a thing. But it's like a double crime if you know what I mean, if you know what I mean, and also the politicians going around and kind of throwing about money, wasting resources. This is a crime in and of itself, So I do want to point that out, and I find it also insulting on obviously the main affront is towards the Palestinians. This goes without question, but I find it, and I've spoken about this with Matt Kennett actually. That it's particularly insulting on a personal level that our grandparents fought in World War II. My grandfather was in the Royal Air Force, and now the Royal Air Force is being used to help Nazis instead of fight Nazis. So it really sullies their name and their memory. And on top of that, of course, just it's a stain that's not going to wash away. That's what I want to say. And how all of this relates to what they're doing to us, I think in Sarah's case, it's quite scary, and it's not an accident that they pulled out this list in the exact same order. As a matter of fact, I would call that, from their point of view, quite a bit of a balls up, because if they knew what they were doing, they would have mixed the order up a bit, so you couldn't really come back and put two and two together. But that they've really kind of shown their hand. And so to me, that suggests that someone somewhere is distributing those lists around to foreign governments and asking for their help. I'm just hypothesizing here, by the way. This is we're just talking out loud, but it's no secret that we are involved in this genocide. Our resources and money and state assets are being allocated towards mass murder. This mechanized meat grinder, and I think it's so bad. I don't know how long it's going to take the Palestinians to recover from this. Our international image is not going to recover from this. I don't even know if you could say it recovered from Iraq. I certainly wouldn't say it did. For me, that was like, and the whole world really, a huge kind of a middle finger by the UK and US to international law, to the UN. And this is just the final nail in the coffin, if we can say it that way. And they're going after us because we say these things, exactly because we lay them out just the way I did now, just the way Sarah has, and Ren and Asa and our other colleagues and comrades. So I think that they're just they just want a cohesive media unit that just speaks favorably of their policies. And I think that's the most ridiculous thing ever. I mean, it might work for a while, but it's not going to work forever, and it's certainly not going to work for us. I think that it just runs counter to everything that is natural, that is humane, and they're not going to win in the end. I think that this is kind of like a beast thrashing about in its final moments. So that's why they just completely seeing red, don't know what to do next.
Yeah, I agree. I fully agree with that. But my interpretation of the name Operation Incessantness was a little different. Um, Although, I mean, who knows why they named it, right?
It's so corny.
It could literally be a random word, but my interpretation was a little more optimistic. Maybe it's right, maybe it's wrong, but I took it to be that the movement against the genocide has been so
Ah,
incessant that they have to do something against it, that we've been so incessant in what we're doing. You know, Richard's constantly streaming, Sarah's posting like, I don't know, probably hundreds of times a day, let alone a week. Palestine Action has been just, I can't keep up with all of Palestine actions. It's incessant,
mm,
you know, and you know, I write a fair bit. So we've been incessant. That's what I took from it. Um, but
yeah.
what I would say is I do agree that they're not finished. That I think that this is the state it's reaching now. It's who's it going to be? Who's going to be next? You know, the latest is Natalie, just this weekend.
Mm,
Um, who's it going to be next? You know, when was it? A week or two ago, it was Chaim Brishith, a retired academic. You know, a Jewish anti-Zionist, incidentally. He was arrested for not even saying anything supportive of any prescribed group, but simply stating an objective fact, which is that Israel has not been able to defeat Hamas and Hezbollah. That's not saying it's a good thing or it's a bad thing. It's simply saying that it hasn't happened. It's just a fact.
mm,
Like
no comment.
yeah, no comment. Like it's like the Israeli press is saying that constantly, like every day, right? But it's reached the stage in Britain now where the police, the counter-terror police, the Labour government's counter-terror police, Keir
Mm,
Starmer's counter-terror police, David Lammy's counter-terror police have decided that you're not allowed to state just objective facts. Um, I mean, the investigation against him has been dropped, it seems, but the fact that he was even arrested for one night should be an absolute scandal, but
yeah,
nothing about it in the British so-called mainstream media.
right. That's another thing. Yeah.
Yeah, that was actually one of the questions people have put to you. If briefly before we wrap up, I wanted to speak, maybe Richard, you could start, speak about the silence in mainstream media and as the comment put from also left journalists. Yeah,
Yeah,
speak to
it's
that
Yeah,
if
it's
you
my
might.
can I go first on that one?
go ahead.
Please.
I also saw that comment in that question in the comments, and the commenter did not name any specific organization, and it made well, we could talk about the mainstream media first. The mainstream media is, by ignoring this, is doing their job. That this is
Right.
literally their job is to hide the truth. Like, right? We shouldn't be surprised by that. Like, it's
Mhm.
corporate media. It's corporate. Their job is to help the interests of capitalism and imperialism. And at the moment, and for the last 50 to 60 years, they've seen themselves as enmeshed also with Zionism, with the project of Israel. It should be a scandal, it should be a national scandal, but it's not. But you know, it's going to reach a point if they keep arresting journalists, if they keep arresting campaigners, if they keep arresting, how far can they go before mainstream journalists start to think, hang on, this could be worrying to me. Eventually, far too late to the party, the mainstream media did have to start saying something about Julian Assange.
Mm,
Very little and very far too late and very hypocritically, but they couldn't ignore it in the end because it was a threat to journalism. And the police are facing the same dilemma now. How far can they push it? And I think they will keep pushing it
yeah.
more, and we'll see how it goes to that. The other aspect of that of the question is this seems to me to be a reference to people like Novara Media, and Owen Jones. Have they said anything about it? I mean, to be honest, I don't watch them anymore. Like I never really did, to be honest. But like as far as I know, they haven't. It's I think when I was raided, Owen Jones made like one tweet where he didn't name me but seemed to be obliquely referring to me, which was pretty cowardly and disgusting. But you know, I've written several articles about Owen Jones's hypocrisy and his excuses for Zionism and for Israel in the past. He's changed his tune now in the last year, but then that's what Owen Jones does. He goes back and forth. Navarra media are even more disgusting in my view. They are total hypocrites. They're, some of the most prominent individuals have actually played a role in driving this repression. Aaron Bastani, in particular, played a role in two young women, one of whom was a Palestinian, being charged with in court with anti-terror charges for a placard they held up at a demonstration and agitating against them. Really disgusting stuff. So I don't think anyone should give money to Navarro Media. They're not an alternative. I'm not saying, okay, you know, people have to use the media platforms they have to use. Okay, fine. I mean, I read, media all the time, which I think is bad media. Okay. But you should have your eyes open. I don't think you should give your money to Navarro in my that's my opinion. Um but they're not an alternative. They're part of the same media blob that we have in this country.
Yeah, I think I know what you're talking about, Asa. We've got these. I think especially in England, you've got kind of a very small bit of an imitation of the American left, if you will, where they're like pretending to be anti-establishment, but like just kind of dipping their toes in the pool quickly. They're not really serious about it at all. And I I of course fully expected the media to say nothing, but it was so funny talking with my cousin who is Palestinian about he sends me this link from Times of Israel where they did a piece about me, right? They actually reported about me being arrested. It was all over the place, right? Like it was in Swiss media, like it was in Chinese and Arabic, in Persian, everything, in French, in English. And the thing is, though, like I'm English and I'm in London, I'm in the capital and at Heathrow, no less, right? I'm being arrested by 6 English police officers under English law. I mean, the first, it's not even like an arrest, which would already be half a scandal, or a scandal in and of itself. But the first one, no less, under 12(1)(a). So it was so crazy. I didn't even know I was arrested. It took me a couple of hours like to fully digest it. And it's like nothing from English media, but the Israelis will talk about it. And to be honest, I hate to give them credit, but even their piece was like not even that as bad as I expected it to be, which was like pleasantly surprising in a way, But whatever. I mean, the just the contrast to kind of show you that the Israelis talked about it, Times of Israel, which is, I mean, it's not. This is mainstream Israeli press, but nothing in England. I mean, just it's like it's so obvious that they don't want to talk about it, and whether they've been served with a D notice or not is irrelevant. You don't have to follow it. You can still choose to talk about it, especially if you're in the. I mean, these are people we share a union with, right? We're technically colleagues, even though we have completely, well, not completely, but just diverging political views. So if anyone should care in any domain in English society, it's them, right? And this is the same dilemma with Julian Assange. And I saw already how it worked back then. I had no vested, like I had no skin in the game, technically, because I wasn't Julian Assange, right? And I wasn't them. I was there to report on the case. And obviously I'm also a journalist, but I'm an independent journalist. So, I was just there and I didn't see any mainstream media. They would rarely come. And I really got a taste of how it was. And I could see, we're going up in these beautiful old buildings in the Old Bailey, in the royal courts. And there's all this procedure and this legal palaver to put him behind bars because of his work. And where are the mainstream media? Nowhere to be found. So I really saw how treacherous the whole and cutthroat the whole industry was. Obviously I come from that anti-imperialist viewpoint, so it's not like I had any trust in the first place. But to have it like happen to you is again like further sobering, if I can say that. And yeah.
Yeah, I can I jump in? I just think that
sorry, I just want to say one thing. At least the NUJ and the IFJ, they've been very solid with their support, and groups like Codepink. So I just want to say thank you to them.
Yeah, no, that was an important thing to add. I from my press organization, I've had no support at all. But I think what I was going to come back to is about the things like the BBC. You know, we kind of are in danger of becoming the mainstream media. And I think that's another thing that the police really fear, or the establishment, certainly the powers that be, really fear. I mean, my first, when I started going online, Electronic Intifada actually was one of the first. Richie Medhurst. If I need to know something geopolitical, I tend to go to Richie Medhurst, because he's already done all the stuff. The maps are there, and the Ben Gurion Canal, and I can learn all the places. And so, in some senses of the word, and Palestine Action, the main movement of Britain is like, everybody follows Palestine Action. Everybody wants to know what Palestine Action is doing. And actually, even in my area, which is very rural, I've got a Palestine Action bag. Everybody knows Palestine Action. So I think also what the mainstream media, what's happening to them is they're fizzling out. People won't pay their TV licenses. There is a generation that watches the BBC religiously, but they're all in their 80s and 90s. And then what's happening is that all the people that are my daughters and sons' age, they don't watch the television at all, but they do read Electronic Intifada. They do read The Grey Zone. They do watch Richie Medhurst. And there's other YouTube channels as well. And Crispin Flintoff, and they do, those are their regulars. So I think that's another thing that is worrying the British establishment, is that the BBC is on its way out. CNN, Fox News, people are getting sick of them. People are starting to use alternative media more and more. And actually, out of my daughter's generation, I don't know anyone who watches the BBC anymore. So this is another danger for them, is that I'm not saying suddenly, oh, I'm the mainstream media, but there's a fear.
No, you should.
That we could become the mainstream media. We could become the most watched, or the most viewed, or the most tweeted, or the most posted. Palestine Action could become the most watched movement. I mean, the PSC really hasn't been that effective. It hasn't made a massive impact in all the years that I was a member. I can't think we actually achieved anything. But Palestine Action, 3 Israeli arms factories gone in 4 years. So that's incredible. And the young people know it. And when I was in Bristol, there was no indication that I was anything to do with Palestine Action. I just happened to walk across the football field, and then sort of 30 or 40 kids started shouting, "Shut Elbit down." And it's like, what? How do you know? How do you know? I mean, I realized I was wearing a Palestinian scarf, but then I'm followed by all these kids shouting, "Shut Elbit down." And I thought, oh my God, this is a movement. When you've got 7-year-old kids, do they even know what Elbit is? I need to ask them. And yeah, so things like that happen now, but they never did when I started supporting Palestine, 20 or 30 years ago. Now it's everywhere. So yeah, that makes us another threat. Once again, incessant. They will incessantly make sure that we do not become mainstream.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I know personally, I get my news from all 3 of you, and I know people in my generation just are rejecting mainstream media, and I think that's another really powerful change that's happened in the past year, as people have woken up to the fact that mainstream media is feeding them propaganda, and that's something that I think is only positive for the world, really. It's positive for the movement of Palestine and for everything else. Just finally to end, I think we need to end with some hope and some things for people to take away. And another question had also asked for this. But in the face of this repression, how do we all resist? What are your takeaways about your own criminalization, which of course, while it's impeded your work, you've all seemed to find ways around it, which I think is so inspiring and can show us all that even though the British state and many other forces have tried to silence you, you're still here, you're still reporting, and yeah, we all thank you so much for that. But what do you think the movement should be doing, both in Britain and the US? What can the movement be doing, not only to rally in solidarity with all of you, and I'd love for you all to share if there are specific ways that people can go ahead and support you. But what do we do to prevent this and to act against the repression before we can even let it get to us? And is there a way to do so? So, Ren, do you want to start and then please add in as you feel?
Yeah, I think that like it's nice to end on that kind of note of like a more hopeful kind of imagining. I think that you have to just resist in any way that is meaningful to you, and any way that feels right for you. I also think that like resistance and solidarity is about being uncomfortable and doing things that perhaps you don't feel like doing or you are scared of. To kind of quote one of the people one of the Filton 10, who are currently on remand, they said that kind of anything that they face pales in comparison to what the Palestinians are facing. And I think that's the main thing that I keep really close to my heart, that whatever I'm facing is a world away from anything that I can ever imagine in Palestine. I also think that like it's okay to ask for like mutual aid and care and solidarity. I think whilst everything, people are being repressed and people are being criminalized and shut down, we still have our communities that offer so much care and community. Palestine Action is amazing at offering support, post action, and the kind of welfare and love that you receive from people not even in the movement, but people in Instagram comments or on Twitter or anywhere, I think is just so nice. And I think that essentially, like, I think you just have to basically keep pushing. I think that there's not really another alternative. I think that all of us here who've kind of spoken tonight feel very, very strongly about these things. And I think when you have that, there's not really an alternative. Yeah, I think that until Palestine is free, there is going to be resistance. And that's not going anywhere, despite criminalization, despite repression, despite terrorist charges. And yeah, if you want to specifically get involved in Palestine Action, you can sign up for a training day. I'm sure they'd love to have you. And if not, that's fine. Just resist in a way that's meaningful to you.
Thank you so much, Ren. Sarah, would you like to go?
Sorry, I think the sound of my own voice, I think I've spoken a lot, but my mantra, I think, is Palestine first. Look, there are days where look, time is running out. You can get very depressed. You can also have this sort of secondary PTSD, which I think I've probably had a couple of times. And there are moments when I think I just can't do this anymore. And then you remember, and I think I concur with what Ren says, we're not facing bullets and bombs. My roof might be leaking a little bit, but I have one. I have a house. My kids haven't been shot and killed. I'm not burying 39 members of my family. Actually, whatever happens, even if I go to jail, even if the police arrest me every single week, Palestine first. And I think somebody else gave me, I'm taking the credit for someone else's mantra, but I can't mention who it is. But that has really helped me, because when you feel a bit down, or you feel that like you've worked, I mean, sometimes 24/7, literally, I've had to get up in the middle of the night because a massacre has taken place. I have a special alarm on my phone, so someone will contact me, and then at 3 a.m, 4 a.m, and then I'll get a bit of sleep, 7 a.m, and then right through 16 hours of the day, right through to about 12 o'clock, 1 o'clock at night, and doing it every single day for years. There comes a point where you're almost screaming because I'm not making any difference. But the point is, it's Palestine first. You don't give up. You don't quit. Get some support. Get some help. Ring somebody up. Talk about it. Have a moan. Shout. I've been out and stopped the poppy parade bollarded the street and did a little single person, you're not going past me with your drums and your horns commemorating death without mentioning Gaza. You know, just little things to sort of, I don't know, pep you up and keep you going, because the Palestinians really need you. They really need everyone right now. And if we get overtired or over depressed, or, you know, we get to over emotional, take an hour out, go and scream at an owl or a fox in the woods, come back, start again, Palestine first. And that's kind of how I do it. I also make a lot of phone calls to a lot of people, but I get through it because I'm not facing those bullets and bombs, and I'm not burying my children. So whatever happens, all right, trash my house, turn it upside down, steal my devices, loot my money, take everything, but I'm still here, and I'm not going to quit ever. I'm not ever going to quit. And if I can't do it on Twitter, I'll find another platform. And if I can't do it on that platform, then I'll shout from the traffic islands through a megaphone, you can't stop me until Palestine is free, basically. I didn't mean that to rhyme. That made it really tacky. But, you know, I'm not going to stop until I've done my job. And as far as I'm concerned, my job now is to save Gaza. All our jobs is to save Gaza. And we just got to go for it. And I'll land my plane there. And I am landing my plane in Gaza, because every time I stop talking, I'm landing a plane in Gaza, because this is going to be the biggest international airport, and it's going to be Palestinian, and we're all going to be on that plane, and we're all going to go there. So I land my plane in Gaza at that point.
Richard, would you like to conclude something?
I mean, I can only echo what Ren and Sarah just outlined, and I share their sentiments. I also feel that as Britons, we have a historical responsibility to talk about Palestine because of the Balfour Declaration, because of British imperialism in general, and of course just the spy plane missions that we were mentioning a few minutes ago, earlier on. So that imperialism and genocide has never really ended, has it? So, and of course, that's why we talk about neocolonialism. So it's not just, you know, responsibility as Britons. There's also, of course, you know, the fact that we as human beings cannot look at these kinds of photos and videos and just ignore them. It's something deeply evil, deeply unnatural, deeply wrong about what is being done to Palestinians, you know, on a very primal moral level. And you know, we are witnessing an injustice and talking about it. And of course, it's also newsworthy. You know, we're not just doing it because we're trying to, you know, take a side for the sake of taking a side. No. This is, you know, this is something that's been going on for decades now, and the West has been systematically, the UK has been systematically destroying one country after the next. You know, we could talk about Iraq as well, of course, Syria, Somalia, Yemen, Libya. I mean, it's really endless. These are millions and millions of people who've been turned into refugees, who've been killed. And ironically, the legislation they're using to persecute us is a relic of that same era of the war on terror. So, you know, we come full circle. We didn't have any skin in the game when we were talking about these issues, reporting on these issues, or you know, those who are campaigning and organizing on these issues. But now we come full circle. And I suppose what helps us continue is indeed the fact that what have I got to complain about in comparison? You know, how it's almost it's humbling. It's sort of like a reality check, you know, for oneself. We have to keep going, and again, like I said, we have a moral responsibility and a historical one. And I suppose it's important to remember that our government is the one that is really abusing the law and is on the wrong side of history. That's really something to underscore. This can't last forever. There's going to be a day of reckoning, and they are the ones who will have to come and apologize to us in one form or another. This is going to happen. This is going to happen, and I'm currently working on something. Although well, I mean, some of you might know what it is, but I'm not going to divulge too much. But I'm using my time constructively. Let's put it that way.
Finally, Asa.
Yeah, thank you. I would say my advice is, and my call now is for everyone to stay incessant. Like, don't give up. Like, keep going. Keep smashing up Elbit. Keep doing it. It's working. Keep speaking out in whatever way you're resisting this genocide, the Holocaust of our times. This is the Holocaust of our times. 50, 60 years from now, we will literally look back on this and, it's become a cliche by now, but we will literally be asked by our children and grandchildren what we did. And I don't know about you, but I want to be able to say that I did everything I could in whatever way, whatever form that takes, whether it's something as heroic as what Palestine Action does, or whether it's something as simple as talking to your colleague at work. Do it. Do it. Stay incessant. Um, Keep on keeping on. I think we have to be in this for the long term. I don't think we should underestimate the impact this has on us in the West. These are, things that, especially what happened to Sarah. Ren's account was also, very disturbing what the police did. Um, we have to deal with these things. We have to be able to talk about them with our friends and loved ones, family, and take time for ourselves, because we have to be in this for the long run. We don't know how long this genocide is going to go on. We don't know how long the occupation of Palestine will continue. And we have to be in it for the long run. But at the same time, as everyone has been saying, it's absolutely true that they raided my house, they stole my computers. You know, Palestinians, journalists are being shot dead, just shot dead, bombed, killed, kidnapped, tortured to death. It happens all the time. The Western media barely talks about it, and it happened long before 7th of October as well. In the most infamous case being the most infamous recent case before the 7th of October being Shireen Abu Akleh, the Palestinian um, correspondent on Al Jazeera, of course, and many, many, many others. And so, we have to keep things in perspective like that. And when you do think, well, yeah, well, I have an obligation to carry on, and we all have that obligation.
Thank you all so much. Your words are so inspiring, and all the actions you've taken. And yeah, just really just to echo what everyone said, while we have this repression in Britain, I think it's 188 journalists have been killed in Gaza in the past year.
Yeah.
So what everyone said, take action where you can. If you're in Britain and you feel ready to, you can join Palestine Action, of course. And if you're in the US as well, please, I encourage you to call Congress to stop HR 9495, which will be passed, which will be up for a vote this week. So please go to codepink.org/block the bill. And if you're interested in joining Codepink locally, there's a link in the chat as well. And if you're in Britain and you want to take on British imperialism and the war machine with us, you can also sign up there, where we'll be hopefully doing some more work on the spy flights soon. So again, follow everybody here, which I'm sure everybody already does. And thank you all so, so much. I think I speak for everyone in the comments, which are flooded in support for you all, that your work is just so incredible and so historically important for us all. So thank you for being here with us. And thank you everyone for joining.
Thank you to Codepink for organizing this.
Thank you to Codepink
Thank you
and
so
to you,
much.
Nufpreet. You've been amazing. Free
Yeah.
Palestine.
Yeah, free
Free
Palestine.
Palestine.
Thank you. Cheers. Bye bye.